Good morning, everyone. We're just gonna give it a few minutes, let everyone join the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started in a minute or two. Thank you. Just again, good morning, everyone. We're just giving it another minute or two for some others to join into the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started probably around 9:32. So we'll give another second or two, and then we'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, looks like it's slowed down a little bit, so I think we can probably go ahead and get started. Be respectful of everybody's time. So, just want to say good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us virtually today on Zoom and for taking some time today to attend this public workshop. Today, we're going to be presenting proposed new rule 67.26 to reduce emissions from commercial chain-driven charbroilers in San Diego County. First, we're going to be doing some quick introductions from APCD staff on the line, and then we'll get into the bulk of our presentation and then have some ample time for questions and feedback. So first off, my name is Nick Cormier. I'm the Rural Development Supervisor here at the Air District. And with me today, I have Miriam Sanchez, our Associate Engineer, who is leading this effort and will be presenting today. We also have Kathy Kean, our Chief of Emission Reduction Strategies, on the line. And we also have our administrative analyst, Janet McHugh, who's helping us behind the scenes. So again, we're here today so you can learn a little bit more about this proposal that we have, but we mainly want to hear from you. We're going to be doing a presentation, and then we're going to have a lot of time to have time for questions, feedback, whatever you'd like to say. This is a good time to do it. If you'd like to take a little bit more time to kind of digest the proposal and what our presentation, and if you'd like to submit comments after today's presentation, we'll be accepting comments on this proposed rule package through December 20th. We will do our best to respond to what we can this morning. But in the case if we aren't able to respond to something in depth or we need time to research it, we'll be preparing a response to comments report that will seek to respond to all the comments that we've received either at this workshop and during the comment period. And we hope to get that response to comments report out usually, a month or so after the workshop concludes. And if you're in the workshop today, you'll receive a copy of that via email. And then finally, we're recording this workshop today, and we're hoping to post the recording up on APCD's YouTube page by the end of the week, so you can take a look at it at your leisure. With that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, we have a pretty a pretty robust presentation today, so we want to make sure this is a new rule. We want to make sure everybody's clear on what we're proposing. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and hand over the presentation to Miriam. So Miriam, go for it.
Thank you, Nick. And hello, everyone. Commercial charbroilers are cooking devices that use very high temperature to cook food and create a charred, smoky flavor. However, Charbroilers generate smoke and air pollutants such as particulate matter, known as PM, and volatile organic compounds, known as VOCs. PM emissions contain macroscopic particles that are so small that they easily travel through our nose and into our lungs, causing serious health problems. VOCs are gases that can react with other gases and existing air pollutants, contributing to ground level ozone. Excuse me. Ozone contributes to smog formation, which also has negative effects on the public and environment. Charbroiling makes up to 16% of the overall inventory of PM 2.5 emissions in San Diego County. Next slide, please. There are two main types of commercial charbroilers, chain-driven and under fire. A chain-driven charbroiler is a semi-enclosed charbroiler that uses conveyor belts to carry the food through the flames and heated area, while an under fire charbroiler cooks on one side at a time, similar to the barbecue grill at home. Chain-driven charbroilers typically use natural gas, but could also be electric. However, electric charbroilers do not reduce emissions from the food being cooked. Chain-driven charbroilers are commonly used at fast food restaurants. Next slide, please. San Diego County is in non-attainment with state and/or federal standards for particulate matter and ozone, which are set by California Air Resources Board, known as CARB, and the Environmental Protection Agency, known as EPA. Additionally, EPA has recently reduced the federal PM 2.5 standard to 9 micrograms per cubic meter, resulting in a greater need to control particulate matter emissions throughout the county. As noted, charbroiling operations are a significant source of particulate matter emissions in the county, which is largely uncontrolled. The proposed new rule being discussed today would reduce PM and VOC emissions to help attain these state and/or federal standards and improve air quality for all county residents. Next slide, please. Reducing VOCs from charbroilers is also an emission control strategy that has been identified in several recent district planning documents. The district scheduled adoption of this proposed measure within the most recent Regional Air Quality Strategy Plan, or RAQS, adopted by the Governing Board in 2022. The measure was also supported by community members and included in the Portside Community Emission Reduction Plan under Action C3, adopted by the Governing Board in 2021. Next slide, please. As mentioned on the previous slide, the proposed new rule would apply to any person who installs, owns, or operates any charbroiler at a commercial cooking operations facility in San Diego County. It would not apply to, I'm sorry, I think I skipped a page. Thank you, I just realized that. So, an overview, these are the proposed requirements for Rule 6726. I will go into more detail for each section in the next few slides. But in summary, proposed new Rule 67.26 would apply to new and existing chain-driven charbroilers at commercial cooking facilities in San Diego County. At this time, the district is only proposing to control emissions from chain-driven charbroilers since controls for under-fire charbroilers are not currently feasible to install. The proposed rule would also limit applicability to chain-driven charbroilers that cook over 415 pounds weekly to be subject to the proposed rule requirements. This threshold is based upon limits in other air district comparable rules and is intended to avoid requiring limited use devices from having to install emission controls. In most cases, chain-driven charbroilers subject to the proposed new rule would need to register their equipment, install a certified flameless catalytic oxidizer to control 83% of PM emissions and 86% of VOC emissions from each unit. They would also have to properly maintain their equipment and keep records of their operations. Because this emission reduction technology is mature and other air districts in the state have had comparable rules for over 2 decades in some cases, the district anticipates such technology being readily available for facilities to install. Next slide, please. As mentioned on the previous slide, the proposed new rule would apply to any person who installs, owns, or operates any charbroiler at a commercial cooking operations facility in San Diego County. It would not apply to under-fired charbroilers or flat-top grills or griddles, or to chain-driven charbroilers at micro-enterprise home kitchens. It would also not apply to limited-use chain-driven charbroilers that cook less than 415 pounds of meat per calendar week, not to exceed 21,580 pounds during a calendar year. To accommodate facilities that only operate during a season, proposed new rule would not apply to charbroilers cooking less than 875 pounds of meat every calendar week during one consecutive 12-week period in the most recent calendar year. Additionally, any devices considered as low emitting that can demonstrate they emit less than 0.5 pounds per day of PM and 0.15 pounds per day of VOC through verified testing would also be exempt. Next slide, please. Here are a few key definitions to be aware of in proposed new rule 67.26. When we're talking about a chain-driven charbroiler, we specifically mean a semi-enclosed cooking device with a mechanical chain which automatically moves food through the heat sources positioned above and below the graded grill and above the graded grill charbroilers at commercial cooking facilities. We're also defining commercial cooking operations to mean any stationary facility that cooks food for human consumption and that engages in the retail sale or offer for sale of the cooked food. Since the rule's applicability is based on meat cooked, meat is defined as any combination of beef, lamb, pork, poultry, fish, game, plant-based meat substitutes, and seafood, all of which should be uncooked. We also included a definition of an under-fired charbroiler to differentiate it from a chain-driven charbroiler. A full list of definitions can be found in Section C of the proposed rule. Next slide, please. As far as emission controls, the proposed new rule would require installation of a catalytic oxidizer to have at least 83% control efficiency for particulate matter emissions and at least 86% control efficiency for VOC emissions for chain-driven charbroilers subject to the rule. This would mean either installing a certified catalytic oxidizer to retrofit your current charbroiler or installing a new chain-driven charbroiler with a catalytic oxidizer already installed from the factory. In either case, the catalytic oxidizer must be certified by South Coast AQMD in accordance with their similar charbroiler rule. If it's certified with them, it will be compliant for San Diego's rule. Should a facility not wish to use a certified device to control emissions, the proposed rule will also allow non-certified catalytic oxidizer or alternative emission control devices to be used. However, you will need to demonstrate equivalent emission control efficiency, and the system will need APC director approval. In either case, the proposed rule will also require maintenance of the emission control system in accordance with manufacturer recommendations. Next slide, please. Facilities that have charbroilers subject to the proposed rule will have options on how they would like to comply in terms of paperwork required. Should a facility elect to install a certified catalytic oxidizer, the district will only require that each charbroiler and oxidizer combination to apply for registration pursuant to APC's Rule 12. This is designed to be a more streamlined, less expensive process. However, if you wish to use a non-certified or alternative emission control system, which is less common, you would need to apply to receive an authority to construct or permit to operate through APCD for each charbroiler. We will cover the cost of each scenario in the next few slides. Next slide, please. For all chain-driven charbroilers subject to the proposed rule, the district will require that weekly and annual records be maintained for the quantity and type of meat cooked for each charbroiler. This documentation will help facilities and inspectors determine applicability with the proposed new rule. We'll also require records to be maintained about the installation and maintenance of the emission control system and require that all such records be available on site for 5 years and upon request by the district. For manufacturers that are curious about the appropriate test methods to utilize for certified units, we have also included reference to those test methods in Section I of the proposed rule. Next slide, please. We will cover a more thorough timeline of proposed rule action in the next few slides. But once the rule is adopted and made effective, any new chain-driven charbroiler subject to the proposed new rule will be required to submit an application for registration or permit to the district prior to the unit being put into operation. For any existing chain-driven charbroilers currently in operation, facilities should start record keeping immediately upon rule adoption, and then within 12 months of rule adoption date, submit an application to the district for the appropriate documentation of the emission control system. Any emission control system in that situation should be installed within 18 months of the rule's adoption. For charbroilers utilizing the low emitting option, which again will be less common, those facilities should start record keeping immediately upon rule adoption and then submit the testing results within 12 months. Next slide, please. To accommodate proposed new Rule 67.26 requirements, Rule 11, exemptions from Rule 10 permit requirements, and Rule 12, registration of specified equipment, will need to be concurrently amended. Changes to Rule 11 will remove an existing exemption associated with charbroiling equipment at eating establishments. Please note that the district will not be soliciting nor considering other changes to Rule 11 that are outside of the scope of proposed Rule 67.26. Changes to Rule 12 will also add the option to register chain-driven charbroilers equipped with a catalytic oxidizer certified by South Coast AQMD. Next slide, please. APCD's fee rule, Rule 40, is also proposed for amendment to add a required fee schedule for charbroiling equipment that is registered or obtains a permit to operate from the district. New chain-driven charbroilers with certified oxidizers would be required to pay a one-time initial evaluation fee of $945 to register their equipment and an annual renewal fee thereafter of $537. Existing chain-driven charbroilers with certified oxidizers would also need to pay a one-time initial evaluation fee not to exceed $945 to register their equipment and an annual renewal fee of $537 thereafter. Chain-driven charbroilers operating with a non-certified emission control device would have to pay a renewal fee of $537 as well. However, the initial evaluation fee would be based on the time and materials known as T&M, and the cost would depend on the control device being installed. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, emission control devices for chain-driven charbroilers is not a new technology, and the district anticipates to achieve PM reductions quickly once fully implemented. The district will be in need of PM reductions quickly to ensure the region is in good position to meeting potential federal attainment deadlines either in 2032 or 2033. As a result, the region requires readily available technology with minimal cost that also avoids disruption of existing cooking styles and cuisines. In some cases, restaurants market their entire operation on charbroiling meat, and removing that as a viable device to use would not be appropriate at present time. That said, the district is supportive of voluntary efforts made by restaurants to switch to zero emission cooking technologies to the extent they can accommodate such in their operations. Next slide, please. State law requires air districts to calculate the cost effectiveness of the emission control regulation being considered. In other words, how much emission reductions are being achieved for the cost it takes to comply. For proposed new Rule 67.26, the district calculated cost effectiveness for PM at $8 per pound reduced and VOC at $29 per pound reduced. The district also estimates the cost of a new unit with a certified emission control device installed to be approximately $30,000 and an emission control device retrofit to be approximately $10,000. Both figures were adjusted for inflation based on South Coast and San Joaquin's Valley cost estimates, and all estimates presented are subject to further refinement. The district encourages manufacturers to submit updated cost information to us during the public comment period to ensure our estimates and calculations are as accurate as possible. Next slide, please. The district worked with the county environmental health department to obtain a list of permitted facilities to identify potential facilities that could be subject to the proposed new rule. The district estimates approximately 200 food facilities that are known or are likely to use a chain-driven charbroiler that could be subject to proposed new rule. Based on data collected, most of these restaurants identified are likely to operate with no emission controls installed today. The district estimates that these facilities emit approximately 24 tons of PM 2.5 per year and 7.5 tons of VOCs per year. If proposed new rule is adopted by the governing board, the district estimates approximately 20 tons of PM 2.5 and 6 tons of VOCs per year would be reduced upon full implementation of the rule. Using EPA's co-benefits risk assessment tool, the emission control reduction translates to annually reducing up to 450 minor restricted activity and lost workdays and up to 240 negative health incidents, such as acute bronchitis, respiratory symptoms, asthma emergency room visits, and hospital admissions. Next slide, please. In preliminary outreach about the proposed new rule, the district was asked to visually show where these 200 facilities were located within the county and in the county overall, excuse me, and specifically under resource communities such as the port side area and the international border. Thus, we've created maps to visually indicate where these facilities are located. While the facility may be denoted on this map, it will depend on their amount of meat cooked whether the facility is ultimately subject to the rule or not. The district will attempt to further refine possible emission benefits to in this specific neighborhood to be achieved in this specific neighborhoods in our final staff report. Next slide, please. The district anticipates taking new Rule 67.26 to the governing board for consideration in April next year. Adoption of the proposed new rule would also require complementary and concurrent revisions to Rule 11, 12, and 40 to ensure the rule can operate effectively. These amendments will also be taken to the board in April. If adopted by the governing board, proposed new rule would become effective in July 2025, and at that point, all new chain-driven charbroilers would need an approved registration or permit prior to operation. Existing chain-driven charbroilers would need to either apply for a registration or permit to operate for approval by the district by April of 2026. And emission controls would need to be installed by October of 2026. Next slide, please. You may find proposed new rule and an informational video in both English and Spanish in the district's rule development webpage. The QR code to our website is shown here, where our public notice, the draft rules, and the informational videos are located. If you have any additional questions or comments, please email me or call me. We'll be accepting comments through Friday, December 20th. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you.
There, unmute myself there. Thank you, Miriam. That was a great presentation. So at this point, now's the opportunity where we'd like to open it up, the workshop, to comments and questions. We'd like to ask if you could raise your hand in Zoom so we can keep track. We've got a small group, it looks like, so we can probably take a good amount of time and talk as much as we need to today. And I'll just kind of go through in the order of how I see it on the screen. And then as a reminder, we'll try our best to answer what we can today. But if there's a chance that we need to kind of get back to something or look further into the question, we'll definitely consider and post our official responses to all of the questions we received today in our response to comments report that will be forthcoming a few weeks after today's presentation. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the room for any questions or comments. I do want to note that Janet posted a link in the chat as well to our website. That's the same link that will take you to that QR code that you saw. It's our rule development workshop website, and that's where all of the draft rules are housed right now. They should be at the top of the page. We have our notice of the public workshop for today. We also have the informational videos that are kind of 5 to 7 minute long videos that are at a much higher level than what we discussed today. So if you're looking for a quick video to kind of maybe forward to somebody that maybe isn't as technical, those are good resources to have to send to people that may not have been able to join us today. So with that, I'll kind of shut up and see if there's any comments or questions that anybody has. Travis, I see your hand up.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Travis. I work for the San Diego Zoo. So we have one chain-driven charbroiler in the park. We currently, I know it as an encindalist, but I believe that's the what do you call it? The catalytic oxidizer. So we currently have one on there. So with this, if this rule goes through, we would have to have it inspected, and then it would be a yearly fee to register. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
Yeah, so I think the one thing we'll have to make sure of on that particular device is that it is certified with South Coast. And I'm guessing it probably is, but you may just want to double check that. But assuming it is, then the intent would be that you would apply for a registration. First you would want to make sure that you're doing your record keeping if the rule gets adopted, and making sure you're keeping track of how much meat is cooked. And then the intent would be to apply for a registration for that device that you already have. And then the intent would be that on an annual basis, you would be renewing that registration, and there would likely be an inspection done once a year from an inspector. They would probably notify you in advance of that. I think in some cases not, just depends, I think, on how they do it. But yeah, that typically they would look at that device once a year to make sure everything's, in good shape and that the records are being maintained.
So as far as record keeping goes, what does that look like exactly? Is that just calculating how many pounds of meat you are cooking a week? Is that basically what that is? Is that
Yeah,
like a
we're
day?
really
Is a day like a daily tally, or is it like weekly tally, or what's the best way to approach that?
I think it will probably depend on what's easiest for the facility, but ultimately we're really trying to see, are you cooking, um, for the facilities that are kind of on the fence of that 415 pounds threshold for where you would need a device or not. Um, we're really just trying to be able to calculate, are you doing more than 415 pounds a week? And if
Yeah,
that's a daily number, that's fine. If it's more easier to do it on a weekly basis, I think that's fine too. I think that's kind of flexible.
so when I got the letter, I kind of looked into it, and we're definitely well below the 400 pounds on that broiler. So does this exclude us from this necessarily, or do we still have to register and do all the record keeping and all that good stuff?
I think and double check me if I'm correct on this, Miriam, but I think that since it sounds like you're doing less than 450 pounds a week, you still probably want to make sure you're record keeping,
Okay.
to be able to substantiate that. But it sounds like you may be exempt from that, from the emission control side of this regulation. Miriam, is that correct, or did I misinterpret something?
Correct, but you would just have to make sure that you stay below that limit throughout the year, not just most of the year. But if you do have those heavier or more busy, times, we also have that one exemption for the seasonal use that could exempt you
I
if
see.
you were to exceed that 415 weekly limit, only for during the 12-week period that we mentioned under the exemptions.
Okay.
Does that
So
make more sense?
yeah, and so for you probably went over this. Sorry, it was a good amount of information. Where will we submit the records to? Is it submitted to your department, or we just keep them on hand until we are asked for them?
I think you would be keeping those if you're claiming exemption, I think you would be keeping those records and available to us unless we're asked to see them.
Okay.
If you're of course, if you're above that 450-pound threshold, then there would be some records probably needing to be looked at some point. In either case, we're not really looking to see and to submit that kind of records on an ongoing basis to us, but we do want to be able to substantiate it if you are using less. We'd want to be able to take a look at those records at some point, if there's ever a question.
Okay. So, and sorry, one other question. So, if we have like our POS and whatnot, we could pull that information fairly easily. That's something that you guys say, hey, I'm coming by next Friday. I need to see your records. We could substantiate that for you, or do we need to physically write it down on a weekly basis to show you that we're logging it every week?
No, I think it would be upon request.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as long as you're adhering to what we're right now in the proposed rule, we're asking that you maintain records for a 5-year basis, going back 5 years. And assuming that you're doing that on an ongoing basis, and since assuming the rule gets adopted as we're hoping in April, I think as long as you're doing the adequate record keeping and having that available, so if an inspector wants to look at it and sees that this particular device doesn't require a registration, and you have the records to show for it at that point, then I think you're probably going to be fine.
Okay. And sorry, I have one more question.
No, not a problem.
We do have a chain driven impinger oven. It's not a charbroiler, but it is electric. Um, that and we use it for toasting sandwiches or whatnot. Does that fall into this category as well?
Miriam, I'm gonna have to ask you if that one might or not.
What did you say? Is it a an oven essentially.
It's an impinger chain driven electric oven. Typically is used for toasting sandwiches. Not meat, just breads and those kind of things. And I think to melt some cheese, I believe.
So there's open flame in this oven that the food
It's
goes
not a
through
flame.
essentially.
There are elements that heat up, so it's not a flame. It's just there's electric elements.
I see. I would have to confirm, but if it doesn't fall in the definition that we have in the change oven where it actually there's flames passing through it, where, you know, there's fat drippings falling into the flames and creating the smoke, that's what we're mostly concerned about.
Okay.
As far as, so if, and also another to keep in mind, if you're, how much you're cooking as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like that particular device may not fit the definition of a chain-driven charbroiler
Yeah,
by how
I
we're
didn't think so,
defining
but I figured I'd ask because we do have one, so make sure we're all, where we
Yeah.
need to be.
it. Understand. Good questions.
Got it.
All right. Thank you, Travis. That was a good feedback there. I see Michelle's hand. Michelle?
Hi, my questions are mainly about emissions calculations and documentation. So my first question is, can you please share the analysis that led to the 415 pound per week and 21,580 pound per year minima?
Yeah, so I think we can share a little bit of how we came up to that number. I don't think we're prepared today to show how exactly we kind of went to the ins and outs of that, but basically the 415-pound number is more or less predicated on a limit that's found in San Joaquin's rule, where they have a threshold of 400 pounds per day within their comparable charbroiler rule. And being an air district and how other air districts evaluate their rules, adopt their rules, and then also with EPA requirements that where we have to more or less be somewhat consistent with one another when it comes to certain rules. That's where we landed on a number of it's not 400, but it's 415. And Miriam, I don't know if you recall how we came up to the 415 instead of a 400 number. I think that it came into kind of the calculations and rounding and kind of just ended up being at a 415 as opposed to a 400. But did you have anything to offer on that one, Miriam?
Yeah, so the 400, we increased it, like Nick mentioned, San Joaquin uses a 400 limit, but we also took into consideration the low emitting units, and we did it based on what is considered a low emitting. That gives you that you're allowed to cook per week, then that gives you about 415 pounds a week, so you don't exceed the low emitting 0.5 emission limit of PM to be considered low. So we increased a little bit just because I think San Joaquin's still has a higher low emitting limit for the low emitting units, but we lowered it to kind of match that up. So that's how we came up with slightly higher than the 400. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I explained it correctly, so apologies.
Okay, are you gonna share this before the rule gets voted on so that people can look at it and analyze, like see if they have comments on it?
Michelle, are you talking about what exactly? Can I clarify what you're exactly looking to see? Are you asking to see if the emission calculations will be available before it goes to the board? Is that the question?
Yeah.
We can, I think what is typically we've been doing is releasing our staff reports, which include this kind of information, when the item gets docketed, and that's typically the week before. If there's an opportunity to include some information beforehand and put out some emission calculation information, we can try to do that, but that's not been typically what we've been doing as of late. So, but definitely before, you know, when the item gets docketed with the board, you know, it would be available then. And then we can also consider putting some of that information within our response to comments report. We may not be able to include all of it in that particular format, but we might be able to include some additional information that could help.
Okay. And then some other questions. Your definition of meat includes animal-based meat and plant-based products. I noticed that AQMD's rule does not include plant-based meat. Do you have separate formulas for emission calculations for each type of meat and plant product?
We do have separate emission factors for the different types of meat. That is correct. We do have that, and that was based on South Coast efforts that were done years ago on that. Miriam, do you happen to recall, do we have a specific factor for the plant-based ones?
There's not a specific one, but we are assuming that we're just taking the beef patties as for the calculations, just because that is the most general type of meat that is being cooked in this type of equipment. For the meat substitutes, they will be different, but we also, based on our survey that we did in the county, not many of these facilities that even provide these options are cooking nearly as the amount as the other regular meat.
Okay.
But
Okay. I was curious about that because I assume that you'll be doing these calculations for the permits. And then also my last question, this goes along with the first one. Can you please share the analysis that led to the baseline emissions and emission reduction estimations?
Yeah, I think the same answer would probably apply on this one, Michelle. I think we can probably provide some information of how we got to those numbers. We can attempt to provide some of that in our response to comments information, but probably the full analysis we can certainly include in the staff report that will be going before the board and would be posted before the item gets docketed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, concerns, feedback? Doesn't sound like it. We got a quiet room today, but we've had some good feedback already, so I do appreciate the comments that we've got so far. I guess while we're waiting, I would just want to make sure that everybody does have just highlight again the link to our workshop page where you can find the draft rules. So hopefully everybody has found that and is able to take a look. We are really looking for feedback on you know, is there things that work in this rule? Is there things that are confusing? This is a new rule. With every new rule, there's going to be some, you know, not issues, but it just will. There's bound to be something that will need to either go into and fix, but we're just trying to get as many of those addressed before we go to the board as possible. And so, you know, this is really a good opportunity to hear, you know, if you're looking at these rules and going, hey, that isn't really quite clear, you know, that could be better explained in this section, or maybe this section doesn't really work with the other one, or maybe it's conflicting. Those are the kinds of comments we really want to hear. And because ultimately this is going to be what's used for implementation and permitting and everything we talked about. So we're really curious to get everybody's feedback. I'll give it one more opportunity, maybe, for if there's any questions or comments. Otherwise, we may be able to end a little early. And not seeing any. I think we can probably end it earlier than we expected today. So I guess just before we close, just a reminder that our public comment period does end on Friday, December 20th. So we'd really like to get comments submitted by then. You can email me, you can email Miriam, you can give us a call, whatever works easier for you. And then, like I said, be on the lookout for that workshop, or we're calling it a response to comments report. It's basically a workshop report, but be on the lookout for that probably in the early part of next year. And then since you're all signed up on Zoom, you'll all receive a copy via email. It will also be posted on our website as well when we get to that point. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. I guess we'll go ahead and close it out, and do appreciate your time and being with us today for learning a little bit more about this. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.